Hi everyone, Deb here to answer some of the questions I've been receiving about start line stays. And I've had the opportunity to work with a bunch of different teams in ocean foundations with various issues related to start line stays. And I've come up with some really clear ways of using a mark trained dog and mark buckets to create super duper clarity about what a start line stay is and what it isn't. One of the questions that I got on Ocean for Dogs in my free group was, how do you fade the mark buckets? And don't dogs become dependent on the mark buckets? The way I use mark buckets at start lines is when I'm not working on start lines and I want to do, say, a bunch of opening line repetitions, I want to work on handling, I want to work on maybe a lateral lead out, that instead of putting my dog and myself through the drudgery of all these setups and all these long, boring lead outs, I'll just send my dog to a mark bucket. And it's kind of similar to the way people use, I think they call them continuous training loops. So they throw a cookie to keep the dog moving. Well, in a sense, this is similar because after each rep, I can send my dog back to the mark. They're generally facing the right direction. If I'm doing a big lead out, they're facing the first obstacle. And I can move on to the next rep without even having to do another start line setup. I also like using mark buckets with young dogs that, if I'm not working on start lines, if I'm not working on impulse control, it's just an easy way to focus on the thing I want to focus on. Again, whether it's handling or training a skill other than that start line skill. And regarding training the start line, once a dog is highly mark trained, I love to use the mark bucket itself as a means for training the start line by not starting the dog on the mark bucket, but instead starting the dog close to the mark bucket, like right in front of the mark bucket, which is going to create mistakes. But the difference between creating a mistake with a start line in front of a mark bucket compared to a start line 8 to 10 to 12 feet away from the first jump or tunnel in a sequence is with the mark bucket, you're almost like freeze framing the mistake. And the mistake is the dog moving a front foot or both front feet and stepping on the mark. Versus if I'm just working with a start line and a typical sequence, I may still mark the release, the dog self-releasing, but that's going to be followed by the dog running, maybe taking an obstacle or two, and then my dog and I were walking back to the setup and setting him up again. By the time I've set him up again, I'm not really sure the dog is even thinking about the error and whether I use a whoopsie word or if just the going back to the start line is the clarification that a mistake was made. I'm not sure dogs really put that together. And the reason I question that is I was recently watching a bunch of young dogs in a seminar, and they were working on a really tough lead out. So the dogs were doing it, 10, maybe even 15 times, maybe even more. I wasn't counting. But the dogs, I could just see that either a little bit of stress building or insecurity about what was happening behind them, or just they were just kind of losing their start line stays. And each time they went back, I didn't feel like there was any clarity that was happening. It was more of a degradation of a behavior that wasn't as solid as it would be, a few years down the road. But even with a dog a few years down the road, with a solid start line stay, when I'm working on something else, and my dog's start line stay is great at trials and practice, I don't feel the need to put my dog through the same long routine of setting him up on the start line, leading out, and all of that. So again, the mark bucket is a great way to do kind of more of a continuous training loop, but with a pause, which I think is significant, that you send your dog to the mark, you tell them good dog. There's a moment for them to reset their minds, to be very present for what's coming next. So versus if it's continuous, I think the dog can kind of go into this spiral of just rapid thinking, and with the long drudgery associated with the handler going back to the start line with the dog, I think that can create, I don't know, some anxiety, stress, or maybe just boredom with some dogs. So I have made a few videos of different dogs working with my setup where it's set the dog right in front of a marked bucket, and you're really looking for the dog to make the mistake by putting a foot up. You mark it if you are a person who uses non-reward markers, and if you are not, you do what you do in that case. But I encourage you all to watch the two videos. One is with non-reward markers, and one is without, to see which in this case seems to create quicker clarity for the dogs. I'm not saying one method is better than the other. I think there are studies that say it's good to do them, it's better not to do them, but for me, my dogs consider my whoopsie word just feedback. There's no negativity attached to it, so I use it, and perhaps sometime in the future I will do something else. What else about start lines? Oh, I think there's something to be said when you're doing a long, long lead out about knowing whether your dog would rather you trot out for a very fast lead out, or if your dog would rather you walk at a slow pace and something that maybe he's never seen you trot out. So what I'm getting at is when I used to do really long lead outs when doing big distance in NADAC, could be up to 80 feet away, I would actually run out to position. And not only were my dogs used to me doing that, but it also became almost like a pre-cue for, this is a big distance run. Expect that I'm going to be 80 feet that way, and you're going to be running facing the obstacle you were facing, and you're not going to be coming towards me. So there was a double whammy in there for that type of training. But I encourage you all to test with your dogs and see, is it the length of the lead out in space, or is the length of time it takes you to lead out that creates a challenge for your dog, that perhaps over challenges your dog with a slightly higher arousal level at trials. And I'd just like to end on one note about how to know whether your dog's start line issue is related to a lack of clarity about what constitutes a release, or if it's an over-arousal issue. They're both pretty common, the over-arousal issue being more of like an exclamation point about the other problem that shows up at trials. But I'd say in most cases, given how twitchy and patterned and repetitive we human beings are as a species, that we think our dog is releasing on verbal alone, and yet we don't realize that we are doing a little head nod, we're doing a little hand twitch, we're doing a whole body twitch, we're moving our feet, we're rotating, we're turning and looking at the dog, which is the release. Or it could be as simple as starting to move your mouth in the orientation of the first syllable of your release word. I noticed that something about Dakota, that when I was playing around with releases and he was self-releasing in surprising ways, I realized he was releasing on me starting to form the O with my mouth. So it was something I needed to proof that one session, and since then, it's not setting him off anymore. So I hope this was useful, and please check out that I've got 3 videos. 2 of them are already on my new YouTube channel, Ocean for Dogs. And I'm going to be uploading more and more things there. I feel like Facebook is so fussy with its algorithms, where if you don't post every day, that people don't see your posts, and who wants to post every day? And who wants to read posts by the same person every day? But you do want to see the posts you want to see, and Facebook, I don't think, makes that possible, given whatever their underlying agenda is, which I have no idea. So I hope you'll subscribe to Ocean for Dogs on YouTube. And also, I've got a couple of classes coming down the pipeline. That one is Mark Training Essentials. It's an expanded version of the Mark Training course I offered in this fall. And that's going to come a few weeks before the winter Ocean Foundations starts up again. And the people in the current Foundations class are loving it. I hope that they'll be sharing in the Ocean for Dogs free Facebook group in the, that date nears for the registration to open for Ocean Foundations. And if mark training sounds like something you want to pursue with your dog, stay tuned. Subscribe to oceanfordogs.com. That's the classroom site where I will be able to send you an email when the Ocean Foundations opens, and also when that mark training essentials class becomes available. So I think that's it. And I hope you're all having a wonderful day and making the best of this crazy world we live in right now. Okay, see you soon.